Imagine for a moment. You are standing in the heart of the jungle, where the air is thick with humidity and drenched in the fragrance of blooming orchids. Sunlight struggles to break through the dense green canopy, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the ancient stone steps. Somewhere in the distance, the cry of a toucan can be heard, and fallen leaves rustle underfoot, which for centuries have sheltered the secrets of one of the most mysterious civilizations of mankind. And suddenly, total silence. Only your breath and barely audible heartbeat in this place where time seems to have stopped 1,000 years ago. Greetings, my dear listeners. Tonight, we are going on an amazing journey through the mists of time to a place where, among the green jungles of Central America, are still kept the secrets of a people who could talk to the stars and predict the future with an accuracy that amazes even modern scientists. Please write in the comments what city you are from and what time it is. I'm always interested to know where our big family is now. The 21st of December in the year 2012. This date is etched in the memory of millions of people around the world as the day when, according to ancient prophecies, the world was supposed to end. The internet was full of apocalyptic predictions. Hollywood films painted pictures of universal destruction, and somewhere in the depths of human consciousness awoke the ancient fear of the inevitable end of all things. But do you know what was really behind these prophecies? What people created the calendar that caused the worldwide panic? And what really happened in the jungles of Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala more than 1,000 years ago? Maya. The word itself sounds like the whisper of the wind in the crowns of the ceiba, a sacred tree that, according to their beliefs, connected the three worlds: the underworld of Xibalba, earthly reality, and the heavenly halls of the gods. Imagine a civilization that emerged at a time when the first barbarian kingdoms were still forming in Europe, and the Roman Empire was in its decline. While European tribes were barely mastering the basics of agriculture, the Maya were already building majestic pyramids, the height of which reached 70 meters, created the most accurate astronomical calendars, and developed the only developed hieroglyphic writing in the Americas. If you close your eyes and try to imagine the world of the classic Maya, you will see an amazing picture. The city of Tikal. At dawn, mist slowly rises from the wet ground, enveloping the bases of the great pyramids. From the top of the Temple of the Great Jaguar, one can see the vast jungle, where the white stone buildings of other sanctuaries peek out among the greenery. Along the wide Sakbe roads, covered with white plaster that glistens dazzlingly in the morning sun, traders hurry by with bales of precious fabrics, sacks of fragrant cocoa beans, and shining jadeite jewelry. The scents of copal, the sacred resin burned in temples, freshly baked corn tortillas, and exotic flowers adorning the palaces of the nobility mingle in the air. But what happened to this great civilization? Why did the cities that once teemed with life and were inhabited by millions of people one day became empty, and their inhabitants disappeared into the jungle, leaving behind only majestic ruins and mysterious stone writings? The story of the Maya is not just a story of disappearance, but of a remarkable transformation that stretched over centuries and still holds many mysteries. When the Spanish conquistadors first set foot on Yucatan in the 16th century, they were amazed at what they saw. The Mayan cities were breathtaking in their grandeur, but many of them were already abandoned. The jungle had partially engulfed the stone palaces and temples, and vines wrapped around the statues of ancient gods. It was as if nature itself was trying to hide the traces of a great civilization, which had reached incredible heights in mathematics, astronomy, and art, but had suddenly faded into the oblivion of history. Europeans could not believe that these amazing constructions were created by the hands of local people. The proportions of the pyramids seemed too perfect, the astronomical calculations too precise, the hieroglyphic texts too complex. For a long time, it was believed that the Maya were only barbarian tribes who accidentally found and inhabited the cities built by some older and more advanced civilization. It took centuries of scientific research for the world to finally recognize that all these wonders were indeed created by the Maya, a people who were able to achieve astonishing heights while remaining essentially Stone Age people who did not know metal tools, the wheel, or draft animals. The history of the Maya has about 2 millennia, but their civilization reached its greatest peak in the so-called classical period, from 250 to 750 years AD. It was at this time were built the greatest pyramids of Tikal and Calakmul, created the most accurate calendars, and written the longest hieroglyphic texts. The Maya population at its peak reached, according to various estimates, from 3 to 13 million people, a figure comparable to the population of the largest European states of that time. But between 750 and 900 AD, something happened that historians call the collapse of the classic Maya. It was not a sudden catastrophe, rather, the slow withering away of a great civilization. One by one, the great cities of the central and southern regions began to empty. Construction of monumental structures ceased. The population dispersed to villages and small settlements, and the opulent palaces of the rulers became overgrown with jungle. What caused this mysterious disappearance? For a long time, scientists have put forward a variety of hypotheses. Some spoke of soil depletion due to slash and burn agriculture, others of epidemics or earthquakes. Still others suggested the invasion of warlike tribes from the north, or the revolt of peasants against the oppressive nobility. Only in recent decades, thanks to the latest archaeological and paleoclimatic research, has the true picture of what happened in the jungles of Central America more than 1,000 years ago begun to become clearer. Imagine a drought, not the usual summer drought that lasts a few weeks or months, but a terrible, debilitating drought that lasts year after year. No rain for a second season, a third, a fourth. The water reservoirs that the Mayans so carefully created near their cities are slowly getting shallow. The green cornfields are turning into dusty wastelands. Beans and gourds are withering at the root. There is a stifling heat in the air and hunger in the cities. Analyses of mud deposits in the Cariaco Basin have shown that between 810 and 910 AD, 3 particularly severe droughts struck Maya territory. And the latest studies of stalagmites in the caves of Yucatan revealed an even more terrible picture. Between 871st and 1021st years, there were 8 perennial droughts, the longest of which lasted 13 years in a row. For small villages, such climatic disasters were a hardship, but not a death sentence. Peasant families could switch to subsistence farming, migrate to more favorable areas, or simply wait out the hard times by reducing consumption. But for the great cities, with their high population densities, complex social hierarchies, and dependence on constant food supplies from the countryside, drought was a catastrophe on a scale equal to modern man-made accidents. The Maya made gigantic efforts to collect rainwater. Imagine the engineering marvels they created without metal tools. Huge reservoirs cut into the rock, complex systems of canals that collected every drop of precious moisture from the roofs of palaces and temples. In the city of Tikal, archaeologists discovered reservoirs capable of holding up to 180,000 liters of water. Entire underground lakes created by human hands. But even these titanic efforts proved powerless in the face of decades-long droughts. However, climatic cataclysms were only one of the causes of the Great Collapse. As if an evil fate pursued the Maya civilization, misfortunes fell on it from all sides at once. While the cities struggled with hunger and thirst, strangers began to arrive from the north and west. Warlike tribes associated with central Mexico and the Gulf Coast. The first wave came from the legendary Teotihuacan, the great city that the Maya called the place where the gods were born. This giant metropolis in central Mexico, with its majestic pyramid of the sun and mysterious pyramid of the moon, dominated Mesoamerica for several centuries. But in the 7th century AD, Teotihuacan fell suddenly. It was destroyed and abandoned under mysterious circumstances that still remain a mystery to archaeologists. Its inhabitants dispersed throughout Central America, and many of them penetrated into Maya lands, bringing with them new military technologies, religious cults, and political traditions. Then, between the 800 and 950 years, came the second wave, the Pipil tribes, who brought with them the distinctive cultural features of central Mexico: mysterious stone yokes and ceremonial axes, new types of pottery, and, most importantly, completely different military tactics. While the Maya traditionally fought to capture prisoners and symbolically subdue the enemy, the aliens from Mexico were more ruthless. They sought total conquest and control of territories. And finally, at the end of the 10th century, the Maya lands were shaken by the largest invasion, the Toltec invasion, led by the legendary ruler Topiltzin Quetzalcoatl. This mysterious character, whose name means feathered serpent, became one of the most colorful figures of Mesoamerican history. According to legend, he was expelled from his capital, Tollan, by hostile priests, and with his followers traveled east to the sea, promising to return one day. Some of his companions reached Yucatan, and there founded a new kingdom with the city of Chichen Itza as its center. The Toltec invasion marked the beginning of a completely new period in Maya history, the so-called Mexican period, which lasted from the 10th to the 13th century. Chichen Itza became a symbol of this new era, a city where the traditions of the Maya and aliens from central Mexico were intricately intertwined. The Great Pyramid of Kukulkan, better known as El Castillo, with its precise astronomical calculations and the play of light and shadow at the equinoxes, epitomized this cultural synthesis. But why were the Maya, who created such a great civilization, unable to unite in the face of an external threat? The answer to this question lies in the very nature of their political system, a remarkably complex and, at the same time, fatally vulnerable power structure that made their civilization resemble a beautiful but fragile glass vessel. Imagine a map of the Maya lands in their heyday. Instead of a single, large state with clear boundaries and centralized power, you will see a mosaic of dozens of small kingdoms, polities, each of which controlled a relatively small territory around one main city. These kingdoms were constantly at war with each other, made alliances that broke up, and were created anew, traded and intrigued in a complex diplomatic game, the rules of which we are only now beginning to understand, thanks to the deciphering of hieroglyphic texts. At the head of each such kingdom was a ruler who bore the sacred title of K'uhul Ahav, Sacred Lord. This was not just a political leader in the modern sense of the word. Kuhul Ahav was considered a living embodiment of divine power, a mediator between the world of men and the realm of the gods. His blood was considered sacred and his person inviolable. Power was passed on by inheritance, usually from father to eldest son, although sometimes women could occupy the throne if there were no male heirs. Each dynasty had its own special emblem hieroglyph, a unique combination of signs which consisted of permanent elements, signifying the title Kuhul Ahav, and a changing main sign, indicating belonging to a particular clan. Interestingly, these emblem hieroglyphs were not rigidly tied to a particular territory. They rather indicated the general, often legendary, origin of the dynasty. Thus, the rulers of cities, located hundreds of kilometers apart, could use the same emblem hieroglyphs, emphasizing their kinship and common mythological roots. The Maya political system was strictly hierarchical, but this hierarchy had many levels and nuances. In addition to the great Kuhul Ahavas, who ruled the most powerful kingdoms, there were dependent rulers of lower rank, who were labeled by the term Yahav, his lord. These were vassals who recognized the supremacy of a stronger neighbor, but retained a certain autonomy in the administration of their lands. The relationship between a suzerain and vassal was very similar to the feudal system of medieval Europe, although, of course, it had its own peculiarities due to local traditions and religious beliefs. The most powerful of the Maya rulers bore the special title of Kalumte, a word that can be roughly translated as emperor or supreme lord. This title was closely connected with the Maya cosmological ideas about the four sides of the world and the center of the universe. Thus, the ruler of Teotihuacan bore the title Western Kalumta, emphasizing his dominance over the western lands. Kalumti were hegemons, rulers who not only controlled vast territories directly, but also had many vassals and allies. During the Classic period, there were several such hegemonies in the Maya lands, which constantly competed for influence and control over trade routes. The main rivals were the kingdom of Kukul, with its center at Tikal, and the kingdom of Kanul, whose capital was Kalakmal. These two giants waged cold and hot war between them for centuries, dragging dozens of small kingdoms and city-states into their conflicts. Tikal, with its majestic pyramids rising above the green jungle sea, had long been the undisputed leader of the Maya world. Its rulers controlled the most important trade routes that brought obsidian from Mexican volcanoes, seashells from the Pacific and Caribbean coasts, and precious jadeite from the Guatemalan highlands to Central America. The city prospered, its population grew, and the pyramids became higher and more majestic. But in the 6th century AD, the situation began to change. In the north, in the dense jungles of the modern Mexican state of Campeche, the kingdom of Canul, with its capital in Calakmul, a city whose name means City of the Two Pyramids, grew stronger. The rulers of Calakmul began a systematic campaign to subjugate neighboring kingdoms and build a vast coalition against the hegemony of Tikal. This struggle between the two superpowers of the Maya world lasted almost 2 centuries and largely determined the political map of Central America. Warfare in the Maya world had its own peculiarities. The goal of military campaigns was rarely the complete destruction of the enemy. It was much more important to capture the enemy ruler, subdue his kingdom, and force him to pay tribute. Military actions often had a ritual character and were closely connected with religious ideas about cosmic cycles and the will of the gods. Battles were timed to coincide with certain astronomical events, conjunctions of planets, eclipses, the beginning or end of calendar cycles. The capture of an enemy ruler became one of the most colorful events in the life of the kingdom. The captured Kuhul Ahab was subjected to public humiliation, forced to participate in ritual performances, and then, as a rule, sacrificed to the gods in grand ceremonies. These events were commemorated on stone steles and became a source of pride for the victors for generations to come. The tribute that the victors levied on the vanquished included a variety of items: precious yubta fabrics, jadeite wares, beautiful feathers of tropical birds, and most importantly, cacao beans. These fragrant beans, from which the Maya prepared a sacred, frothy drink, served not only as a ritual product, but also as a universal unit of currency. A few grains of cacao could buy a ripe tomato, 100, a turkey, and 8,000, a canoe. Control over the regions where cacao was grown meant control over one of the most important sources of wealth in the Maya world. But this complex system of political relationships, which had provided relative stability in the region for centuries, proved fatally vulnerable to external challenges. When droughts began, and waves of migrants from the destroyed northern states poured into the Maya lands, the political system simply could not adapt to the new conditions. Small kingdoms failed to unite against a common threat, continuing to fight each other even when their existence was in mortal danger. One by one, the great centers of classical civilization began to decline. First, the stonemasons in Palenque, the city where the most exquisite bas-reliefs and texts were created, fell silent. Then the palaces of Yaxmul and Piedras Negras were deserted. Finally, in the 9th century, the capital of the Great Tikal fell, a city that for more than 5 centuries had been a symbol of the power and prosperity of Mayan civilization. But even as the great cities became empty and overgrown with jungle, as stone roads cracked under ceiba roots, and pyramids were slowly covered with a green blanket of lianas, the spirit of Maya civilization did not disappear without a trace. It melted into the countryside, took refuge in small villages lost among the hills, and continued to live in the minds and hearts of people who still counted the days according to ancient calendars and watched the dance of the planets in the night sky. To realize what an incredible legacy the Maya left us, imagine for a moment a world without numbers. A world where you would have to draw 347 separate sticks or pebbles to write the number 347. A world where complex mathematical calculations would be virtually impossible simply because there was no convenient way of writing down large numbers. This was the world in which most of the civilizations of antiquity, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, lived. And only a few nations on Earth managed to make a great breakthrough by inventing a concept that seems so simple and obvious to us today: the concept of zero. The Maya were among the first in the world to realize that nothing is also something. Their symbol of zero, an elegant shell or stylized flower, was not just an empty space, but a full-fledged number that could be added, subtracted, and used in complex calculations. This ingenious idea allowed them to create a system of positional recording of numbers, where the value of each digit depended on its place in the record. Imagine a priest astronomer in a quiet scriptorium at the temple of Copan, who, by the light of an oil lamp, is covering a stone stele with hieroglyphs. His hand confidently inscribes dots and dashes, the ones and fives of the ancient Mayan number system. 1 dot represents a 1, 2 dots represent a 2, a dash represents a 5, and 2 dashes represent a 10. Numbers from 0 to 19 are written with combinations of these simple symbols. And for larger numbers, an amazing vertical system is used, where each level represents a degree of 20. The Mayas' 20-digit number system was not an accident, but a reflection of their deep understanding of nature and the cosmos. 20 was the number of fingers and toes on the hands and feet of man. 20 days made up the sacred month of Uwinal. 20 Winal formed the year of Tun. Everything in the Maya universe was linked to this sacred number, which symbolized the completeness and perfection of creation. But for the Maya, mathematics was not an end in itself, but a tool for understanding the greatest of sciences, astronomy. In a world where there was no electric light, and the night sky shone in all its splendor, the stars became a book on which you could read the will of the gods and predict the future. Imagine a Mayan astronomer on top of a tall pyramid on a moonless night. The Milky Way spreads over his head a silvery river, which the Maya called the White Road, the path of souls to the afterlife. Venus shines in the east, heralding the imminent arrival of the sun. Mars moves slowly between the constellations, and somewhere in the depths of space twinkle distant stars, each with its own name and meaning in the complex Mayan mythology. Observations of the sky were made in the city of Copan with remarkable precision. This amazing city in the mountains of Honduras became a true Alexandria of the ancient Maya, the center of science and scholarship, where the most accurate calendars were created and the most detailed astronomical tables were drawn up. The astronomical priests of Copan were able to measure the 584-day cycle of Venus with an error of only 2 hours, a result that boggles the mind even today. They knew the exact length of the lunar month and could predict solar eclipses with an accuracy of about 55%, using only the simplest observational instruments. The majestic ladder of hieroglyphs at Copan, the longest known Maya inscription containing more than 2,000 signs on 62 steps, was not just a historical monument, but a kind of stone encyclopedia, where the most important astronomical and calendar knowledge was recorded. Each hieroglyph on these steps was carefully calculated and placed in accordance with the Maya cosmological ideas about the structure of the universe and the movement of celestial bodies. The Maya knew about the existence of 5 planets: Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus. Each of them had its own patron deity, its own color, and its own significance in a complex system of prediction. Venus was particularly important. This brightest of the planets was associated with the god of war and was considered a harbinger of important events. Wars were often started on days when Venus was in certain phases of its cycle, and the rising or setting of this planet could signal the beginning of religious ceremonies. Of all the achievements of the Maya, their calendar system was perhaps the most complex and perfect. They created not one calendar, but a whole system of interconnected calendars, which worked like a giant cosmic clock, measuring time from a moment to eternity. The system was based on 2 calendars: the sacred 260-day Tzolk'in and the civil 365-day Hab. Tzolk'in was the heart of Maya religious life. Imagine 2 gears that rotate at different speeds. One has 13 cogs, and each has a sacred number written on it. The other has 20 cogs with the names of the days. These gears rotate, and each day gets a unique combination of number and name. The 1st of January could be 1 Imish. The 2nd of January could be 2 Ik, and so on. 260 days later, the combination was completely repeated. But for the Maya, each day of this cycle had its own special meaning, its own character, and its own omens. The Hab was a more practical calendar based on observations of the sun. It consisted of 18 months of 20 days each, plus an additional short period of 5 days, which was considered an extremely unfavorable time. These 5 days, Vayeb, were a time of chaos, when the gods slept and evil forces could penetrate the human world. During these days, the Maya tried not to undertake any important business, not to travel, and not even to leave the house without an emergency. The combination of Tzolk'in and Hab created the so-called calendar circle, a cycle of 52 years, through which the days and months returned to the original combination. For the Maya, the completion of the calendar circle was the most important event, celebrated with grandiose ceremonies. Old temples were destroyed or built over with new layers. Images of the gods were renewed, and special purification rituals were performed. It was a time of death and rebirth, the end of one era and the beginning of another. But even the calendar circle was insufficient to record really ancient events or to make long-term prophecies. So the Maya created another system, the long count, an absolute chronology that could span millennia. The long count was based on the Tun, a period of 360 days. 20 tuns made up a Katun, about 20 years. 20 Katuns made up a Baktun, about 400 years. And 20 Baktuns made up a Piktun, about 8,000 years. The Maya's starting date was the 13th of August in 3114 BC, the mythological day on which they believed the gods created the present world after the destruction of previous cosmic epochs. From then on, the priest chroniclers kept a continuous count of days, recording the dates of important events in a system that was more accurate and convenient than most calendars used in other parts of the world. All this astronomical and mathematical knowledge was recorded using an amazing writing system, the only developed hieroglyphics in pre-Columbian America. Maya stone steles were covered with complex texts that told of the deeds of rulers, the predictions of priests, and the will of the gods. But with the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors, this ancient wisdom was threatened with total destruction. Spanish priests saw Mayan hieroglyphics as the devil's work. The Franciscan monk Diego de Landa, who later became Bishop of Yucatan, organized a real crusade against Mayan writing. In the year 1562, a grandiose book execution was organized in the city of Mani. Thousands of Maya manuscript books, codices written on ficus bark, and covered with colorful illustrations, were piled in a huge heap and burned. The smoke from the fire rose to the sky for days, and with it, invaluable information about the history, science, and religion of one of humanity's greatest civilizations. Only 3 complete Maya codexes have survived: the Dresden, Madrid, and Paris codexes, named after the cities where they are preserved. These fragile books are the only witnesses to a writing tradition that evolved over many centuries. For centuries, scholars have tried to unravel the mystery of Mayan hieroglyphics, but most attempts have ended in failure. The system of recording numbers was deciphered back in the 19th century, and the hieroglyphs of days and months could also be read thanks to the labors of the same Diego de Landa, who, paradoxically, not only destroyed Mayan books, but also recorded information about the calendar and some symbols. But the bulk of the texts remained incomprehensible until a young Soviet linguist, Yuri Valentinovich Knorozov, took up the task. In 1952nd year, without leaving his office in Leningrad, this amazing man made a breakthrough that revolutionized the study of ancient American civilizations. The secret of Knorozov's success was that he realized that Mayan writing was not based on ideograms, as previously thought, but on a syllabic system. Each hieroglyph conveyed not a whole concept, but a single syllable, and words were formed from these syllables, like cubes. This discovery literally exploded the scientific world. Suddenly, the stone steles came to life. The inscriptions on the vessels spoke, the voices of ancient rulers who had been silent for over 1,000 years resounded. We learnt the names of kings and queens, read stories about wars and diplomatic marriages, understood the complex structure of the Maya political system. The history of this civilization has ceased to be a collection of disparate archaeological finds and has become a living chronicle of human passions, ambitions, and achievements. And it is thanks to the work of Knorosov and his followers that we were able to solve one of the most intriguing mysteries of our time: the mystery of the prophecy of the 2012th year. After all, the source of all the rumors about the end of the world were not the fantasies of modern mystics, but quite specific stone inscriptions carved by the Maya more than 1,000 years ago. The main one was found in the Tortuguero site in the Mexican state of Tabasco, a small stone tablet that caused worldwide panic and gave rise to thousands of theories about the coming apocalypse. This tablet, made about 1,300 years ago, mentioned the completion of the 13th Baktun, a huge calendar cycle that was to end on the 21st of December in the year 2012. For the Maya, the number 13 was sacred. It symbolized completion and perfection. 13 levels had the sky in their cosmology. 13 were the gods of the upper world, and the completion of the 13th Baktun meant the end of one great cosmic epoch and the beginning of another. The inscription from Tortuguero mentions the mysterious deity Bolon Yokte, one of the most mysterious figures of the Maya pantheon, associated simultaneously with war and creation, with destruction and with rebirth. Some researchers interpret the symbol at the end of the inscription as a prophecy. He will descend from the sky. But what did it mean? The end of the world? Or vice versa? The beginning of a new, better era? To understand what was really behind this prophecy, we need to delve into the thinking of the ancient Mayans, for whom time was not a straight line leading from the past to the future, but an endless spiral of cycles where everything repeats itself, but each time on a new level. Imagine a wheel that spins, returning the same spokes to the same point, but the wheel itself moves slowly forward along the road. This is how the Maya perceived the passage of time, as a cyclical process where each end is a beginning and each completion is the birth of something new. For the Maya, the 21st December of the year 2012 was indeed a special date, but not because the world was going to end on that day. It was the date of the completion of the grand cosmic cycle, the 13th Baktun, which lasted almost 5,125 years. Imagine a giant cosmic clock, the hands of which make a full revolution once every few millennia. On the 21st December of the 2012th year, such hands had to return to their original position and start a new countdown, just as an ordinary clock at midnight shows not the end of time, but the beginning of a new day. But why then was there such a stir around this date? Why did millions of people around the world really believe in the coming apocalypse? The answer lies in the fact that another element was added to the Mayan factor, a mysterious story about the planet Nibiru, which was supposed to collide with the Earth in the year 2012. The story of Nibiru began long before the hype around the Mayan calendar. Ancient Sumerian texts mentioned a certain celestial body that periodically appeared in the sky, bringing catastrophes and changes. Researcher Zechariah Sitchin, who studied Sumerian mythology, suggested that it was a real planet with a very elongated orbit, which once in more than 3,000 years enters the inner part of the solar system, causing earthquakes, tsunamis, and sending dangerous asteroids and comets to Earth. The idea of the existence of an unknown planet beyond the orbit of Neptune was not entirely fantastic. Astronomers did discuss the possibility of large trans-Neptunian objects, and some features of the motion of the giant planets could point to the gravitational influence of some massive body on the fringes of the solar system. But scientific speculation about a possible Planet X had little to do with what proponents of the Nibiru theory were telling us. The real stir began when so-called contactors, people who claimed to receive information from extraterrestrial civilizations, got involved. The most famous of them was Nancy Leader, who claimed to communicate with representatives of the Zeta civilization from the constellation of Setka through a special brain implant. According to her, the aliens warned her that the planet Nibiru, 4 times the size of Earth, was on a collision course with our planet. Initially, the leader called the date of the catastrophe May 2003. When it did not happen, she received new information from her space mentors. The collision was postponed to the year 2012. It was then that the story of Nibiru became intertwined with the Mayan calendar, creating an explosive mixture of ancient prophecies and modern fears. The internet proved to be an ideal medium for the spread of such theories. Conspiracy and esoteric websites were abuzz with sensational revelations that governments were hiding the truth about the approaching planet from the public. Dozens of videos appeared in which red arrows pointed to suspicious objects near the sun on satellite images, claiming that these were the approaching Nibiru. An entire fear industry emerged that fed on human anxiety about an unknown future. But the scientific world treated these theories with understandable skepticism. Professor of Planetary Astronomy Michael Brown of the California Institute of Technology, one of the leading experts on trans-Neptunian objects, patiently explained why the Nibiru story doesn't hold up to any criticism. Firstly, any body with an orbital period of more than 3,000 years would be extremely unstable and would have long ago flown from its orbit under the influence of gravitational disturbances from giant planets and passing stars. Secondly, if a planet the size of 4 Earths was really approaching us to collide in the year 2012, it could be seen with the naked eye already several years before the catastrophe. Brown made a simple calculation. A planet of this size could be spotted at a distance of at least 1,000 astronomical units. By comparison, Neptune is only 30 astronomical units from the Sun. Even traveling at the incredible speed of 2,400 kilometers per second, it would take Nibiru at least 2 years to cover that distance. That means it could not have reached Earth before the year 2014. But most importantly, an object traveling at a speed of 2,400 kilometers per second would not have been able to stay even within our galaxy. Such a speed is much higher than the second cosmic speed for the Milky Way, and such a body would simply fly away into intergalactic space. Nevertheless, fears continued to grow. Astronomer David Morrison of NASA noted that he received hundreds of letters from people, especially young people, who sincerely believed that disaster was coming. Many of them confessed that they do not plan to go to university or have children, believing that they will not live to see the year 2013 anyway. Some even made radical decisions, and Morrison knew of several suicides by people who didn't want to wait for the end of the world. This tragic irony was nothing new in human history. Back in 1997, after sociologist Courtney Brown's claims that the Hale-Bopp comet was being followed by an alien ship, 39 members of the Gates of Heaven sect committed collective suicide, hoping to get on that mythical ship. Human history is full of similar tragedies, when false prophecies and unfounded fears led to real victims. But why do people succumb so easily to such theories? Psychologists believe that belief in the end of the world may be a way of coping with the fear of individual death. If the whole world dies at the same time, death ceases to be a personal tragedy and becomes part of some great cosmic event. Or, conversely, the constant refutation of these fears subconsciously convinces us that life is eternal, and thus we ourselves can hope for immortality. Meanwhile, the true descendants of the Maya, more than 7 million of whom live today in Central America and beyond, watched the worldwide hysteria around their ancient calendar with amazement and some annoyance. The chief elder of the Maya Council, Apolinario Chile Pishtun, tired of answering journalists' questions about the end of the world, and patiently explained that the Maya had never predicted the apocalypse. The staff of the National Institute of Anthropology and History of Mexico has also repeatedly emphasized that the Maya simply divided time into cycles, and the end of one cycle always meant the beginning of another. This was not eschatology, but cosmology, not a doctrine of the end of the world, but a view of its structure and development. Moreover, some scholars believe that the inscriptions at Tortuguero may refer to an event that has already occurred in the past, rather than to a future prophecy. Indeed, if we study other Mayan texts carefully, it becomes clear that this civilization planned an existence far beyond the year 2012. Some inscriptions mention dates thousands and even millions of years into the future. The Maya thought not of the end of the world, but of the infinity of time, not of the apocalypse, but of the eternal cycles of death and rebirth. The 21st December of the year 2012 passed quietly. The sun rose as usual, birds sang, children went to school, and adults went to work. No catastrophes occurred. No planets collided with the earth. No aliens appeared in the sky. the world continued to exist, as scientists had predicted, as the true descendants of the Maya knew it would. But what happened to the Maya civilization itself? Their story did not end with the collapse of the classical cities in the 9th century. The last independent Mayan city-state, No'Payton, also known as Tayasal, did not fall until 1697, when it was captured by Spanish conquistadors. This means that the Maya civilization survived almost 800 years longer than is commonly believed, adapting to changed conditions and finding new forms of existence. And today, when we walk through the ruins of Tikal or Palenque, when we touch ancient hieroglyphs with our hands, or climb the steps of the Great Pyramids, we touch not dead archaeology, but a living culture. The descendants of the builders of these wonders still live in the jungles of Central America, speak the Mayan languages, grow the same corn that their ancestors cultivated 2,000 years ago, and observe the same constellations in the night sky. Their calendars still count down the days and years. Their shamans still read the messages of the gods in the flight of birds and the movement of clouds. For them, time did not end on the 21st of December, 2012. It simply passed into a new cycle, as it has done so many thousands of times in the long history of this amazing people. The history of the Maya teaches us much. It shows that even the greatest civilizations are vulnerable to climate change and political instability. It reminds us how easily the legacy of the past can be distorted and misunderstood, especially when that legacy is filtered through the prism of modern fears and prejudices. But most importantly, it shows that cultures do not disappear without a trace, but transform, adapt, and continue to live on in new forms. The majestic Mayan pyramids will stand for thousands of years to come, reminding us of what the human mind can achieve, armed only with observation, patience, and a thirst for knowledge. Their calendars will count down the time long after you and I have left this world. And somewhere in the jungles of Guatemala or the mountains of Chiapas, an old Mayan shaman will be telling children ancient legends about how the gods created the world out of corn dough, how the sun and moon played ball with the lords of the underworld, and how time moves in a circle with no beginning or end. And in this continuity, in this connection between past, present, and future, lies the true wisdom of the Maya. Not in false prophecies about the end of the world, but in the understanding that life goes on, that after every winter comes spring, after every sunset comes a new dawn, and that every ending is but a new beginning. Our night journey into the ancient Mayan world is coming to an end. It may be getting light outside the window, or on the contrary, the night is just coming on. Time flows according to its own laws, beyond our desires and fears. But wherever you are at this moment, remember, you have become part of a great history that began thousands of years ago in the jungles of Central America and continues to this day. Good night, my dear friends. May you have good dreams of majestic pyramids rising to the stars, of wise astronomers reading the messages of the heavens, and of the endless dance of time that never stops. See you on our next night journeys.